Okay, this is W5HRO. I've got kind of a major project going on here with this T368 exciter. I've had to dismantle it. It's got some bad components on it, and I've been going through fixing it up. Basically what I did was I was going through and I was wringing out all the resistances to ground, on all the tube socket pins and everything, and I found some issues, and then the line going to the screen, where is it? What I discovered is I've got the actual, this is the E model T368 exciter. It's from an E model, and this schematic is very hard to find. This is the one here, added E model transmitter, and mine's different because I printed this thing out, and I'd gone through and I taped it all together. I thought, this is going to be great. I can go through this schematic and use this to do the whole thing. And and after I looked at it, wait a minute, why is pin 12 on P101 shorted to pin 5? This one is completely different, the way they're doing the screen and some of the grid biasing. So I'm having to, ignore this schematic. Basically, pin on mine, I'm going to eventually have to, at some point, document this so people won't get confused, because I'm going to post this stuff on my web location, w5hro.com. When I get this thing completely done, I'll post all the information on it. But what I've got is here, what I do, I somehow lost the page I was working on. Oh, here it is. This is upside down now. You can see pin 12. What it does is it goes up here to the 15K resistor to the screen. Well, it looks like on the later models, like this E model, they must have done something to connect the screen to a different supply than what they were doing before. Because what they were doing before on the earlier models, it looks like I said, they had pin 12 shorted to pin 5, and if you trace pin 5 down, it comes up here to all these other 1K resistors that go to the plates of all the other tubes. So they connected it to that. Probably the level wasn't right, and they had to make it variable, or they had to just change it to a different supply level. So they just ran that wire down from the 15K to a separate pin on this connector, P101. So the E models like I have here are different. But this is the schematic Fair Radio sent me. Fair Radio sent me the entire manual on the E model years ago when I got this exciter. It's probably like 1998, I think, is when I acquired it. A year or two before I left, maybe 99. I think it was probably 98. It sounds about right, because it stayed in my drawer for about a year before I moved. Anyway, but what I discovered is this 15K, I was measuring from pin 12 on this connector, pin 12, and when I measured it to that pin on the socket, pin 8, it was showing about almost 130 ohms, and I'm like, what the freak? So I got to looking, and sure enough, I took it apart, and that resistor was burned up. It actually goes, where is it? This is where that screen resistor is on these things. It was right here. It's R120, and it was completely burned up. I mean, I cleaned all this with acetone, so I got all the gunk off, because it kind of, it left a lot of residue on there. But here's the resistor. The darn thing measures 119 ohms by itself. You probably can't see, the light's probably not that good, but it's completely burned up. It's dark, and it oozed out not oozed out, but it just left some oily residue underneath it, which I got off. So what I did was I removed the resistor, and I just moved the wire from where it was on the other end to the other end, and just short it to pin 12, because I'm going to have a variable output control circuit on this screen anyway to control the drive level. So the 15K resistor doesn't have to be there. It can be on the other end of this cable with my circuit. It won't matter. But I did go through, and if I can get the thing lined up here so you can see it. It's very hard to see this. This is a very tedious thing to work on, and I'm not kidding. There's that, the 6,000 tube socket. I pulled all the capacitors off of it, and I'm just going to add the one from the screen down the ground, and then the one that goes to each side of the filament. I went ahead and I removed those too. They were .003s. These look like metal film caps because there's one of them I decided to go ahead and when I took it off, I cut it open. If you can see it, it looks like it's a metal film inside. So those caps are probably okay. I would bet that most of them are. And here's the one that was on the screen. It's a 5,000 picofarad. So I'm just going to replace it with a new one. It's probably leaking at high voltage, which may have been why the resistor burned up. Or, you know, somebody was playing around and they had the supply too hot to drive level. But that definitely had to be corrected. But I cleaned this thing up. What I've done is I've taken my acid brush with acetone. You know, I got cans of acetone and I've been cleaning this thing. WD-40 did everything first and I cleaned everything up after that with acetone. And I've been resoldering all the connections because some of them looked pretty damn cold. So that was critical. But if I go here now and I clip my ground probe of my ohm meter here, and I go back and I check all these connections now. Where is it here? It's, where's the right page? I have too many things here. What I've done is I've set up a temporary workstation. I have a piece of wood stretched across a couple boxes stacked up, and I brought that table in the radio room here for just to store everything else. I've got kind of a mess here, as you can see, but I'm working on this stuff, so it's just going to be like this until I get done. But if you look here, the 6,000 tube, pin 3 should be 0, and it is. It's auto ranging 0.0 ohm, so it's a dead short. And what I did was I went through, what I've done is I've removed the relay. This is the model, this is the relay that were in the later models. The earlier ones look like they do in this old diagram here from the A, B, and C version models. That's one of the early relays, but this one was different. But what I did is, if you look at it, the only time you need to relay is when you're switching like FSK or and you're going to externally excite the exciter with another VFO. Well, I don't plan to do that, and I want to keep things simple. So what I did was, if you look at the schematic, you just have two wires that are shorted together, and one of them is just shorted to ground, and the other two are shorted together, which is basically what I've done here. I took the relay out and I just jumpered the two that connect together like it is at default for AM use. So that's what I did. I'll just put some heat shrink over those and just leave them. They'll be fine. But it cleans it up. It leaves more space, and it's nicer to have that junk out of the way. And this other jack here, which I'm never going to use either, I went ahead and removed it and the stuff connected to it because it makes more room in here to work on this stuff. I'm just trying to simplify it. But anyway, if you go back now and you look, I've checked all the resistances. And I also changed the 6.8K resistors. There were 6.8Ks. They were reading, one of them was reading almost 8. Like they're right here, they're on the grid to ground on the multiplier tubes. And these were reading like, it was huge. It was, one of them was reading almost 8K and the other one was reading like 7.5. So I replaced those two resistors underneath there. It was kind of delicate, tedious, but I got it. So basically now, if I look at this, the first multiplier, if I go to pin 1, yeah, it should be infinity, right? Which it's gonna be. Yeah, there's nothing there. Oh no, pin one's over here. Sorry, got this kind of backwards. Pin 1's there. So if I look at pin 1, it's just open. And then if I look at pin 2, I should see about 100 ohms, right? Where is it? Where am I? I'm on the wrong tube. That should show 100 ohms right now. Why aren't I seeing 100 ohms? Oh, there. Yeah, see, it's 109.7. That's close. Good enough. That hasn't drifted too far after all these years. And then pin 7 should be 100 ohms too. So pin 7's over here. I should do a better job of trying to line the camera up, and it's exactly the same. So both of those are fine. So now if I go to the second multiplier, I should see the 6.8K from pin 1 down the ground. There's pin 1. 7K, yeah, close enough. You should have seen it before. It was like almost 8. It was 8. It was like 8 something, and the other one, the third one was like 7.5. So anyway, and then if I look at pin 2, it should be 330 ohms. 0.34K, that's 340 ohms. That's close enough. And then if I look, the only other one that should have something on it, the rest of them should be open, which I already did, checked them, they are. Pin 7 should be the 330. So I go over here to pin 7. If I can get in, there we go, I've got in there. Yep, same thing, 340 ohms, so that's good enough. So then if I go to the last one, pin 1, on the third multiplier should be the 6.8K. And it's reading the 6 point, yeah, that's the new resistor, of course. The other one reads, for some reason, it reads a little higher with the other components connected to it. And let's see, and then pin 2 should be 330 ohms. And I noticed this one was a little high. It's reading like 485 ohms. But if I look at the other one over here, pin 7 should be the 330 ohms too. It's just like the other one. It's 478 ohms, 490. Wait a minute, let me hit this again. Yeah, 485 ohms, 486 ohms. That's good enough. They're both the same, so I'm not worried about it. But the main thing was getting that 15K jumper to cross and removing it, and then changing the caps, because those bypass caps on this 6,000 tube socket needed to be changed. There's a chance that they're leaking, which could have caused the problem. I'm also going to replace this one here. So I'll put the new caps on this thing tomorrow, but that's what I've been doing. I've been going through this darn thing trying to, because I found problems. This thing is, it came from Fair Radio back in the late 90s, and I never checked it, so I assumed it worked. Obviously, there's some stuff wrong with it, so I'm having to go through, and I'm doing this before I try to power it up. So the resistance paths were the main things, getting all the stuff at all the right things at the right, at the tube sockets on the right pin. So that's all correct now. I just got to replace those caps I took off the 6,000 tube socket. Then I can build up the supplies and try to get it to power up. But I'm going to power it up before I put the tubes back in, and I'll check all the voltages, because I'm looking at this and it's a little confusing. I'm not sure about pin 8. I've got to get out. I do have the rest of this E-model manual. I got to get out the rest of it, because this is one of the pages I pulled out of it years ago, and I put it in a separate folder with my notes to work on this. But I have the other pages to this. I have the rest of the schematic. So I've got to find it, because I'm not sure pin 8 requires the 55 volts on this E-model. That's what I got to look at, because the grid bias looks like it might be a little different. I'm not positive though. But I'll figure it out. But anyway, I'm getting close. I just want to get all the resistance paths and the problems corrected before I try to put power to this thing. I did order the filament transformer. What I found is, this is for the 6,000 tube. It's 25 volt center tap at 0.3 amps, 300 milliamps. Well, I could just use the 25 volts from the one end, green to green. I could probably even ground the center tap on the filament. It's not going to DC, so I'm going to see, I'll see 13 something across both of them anyway from the center tap to each side. But what I want to do is, this should be, the 6,000 tube requires 26.5 volts, right? Well, it's plus or minus 2.7 volts, so a 24 volt transformer would work too. But I thought, well, the tube draws 280 milliamps. This one's 300 milliamps, and it's 25 volts. So when I load it down, it's not going to load it down 100%. It should be a little hotter than 25 volts, right? It should be closer to maybe 26, and I'm hoping it's going to come out just dead smack where it needs to be. But this transformer will work fine. And it was cheap. It was like 12 bucks. So that solves my problem. Let me get this out of here. Yeah, see, it's just a small transformer. I can mount on the relay rack, and it should work fine, 300 mils. Oh, my meter's timing out now, telling me to save battery. So anyway, that's it for now, and as soon as I get this thing all put back together and I get supplies powered up to it, I'll do another video. So this is the B5HRO.